I would say that I think one of the biggest challenges we're seeing in a fast urbanizing world is the leadership and the people in cities to ensure a balanced development process that will uphold both the social, economic, and environmental perspectives of development, and in so doing, prevent some of the challenges. Because of that imbalance, we see a rising inequality, where the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer, rising levels of unemployment, and whereby even employment that's available is getting much more informal and therefore much more at risk, and also a rising level of vulnerability to natural and man-made disaster, where up to around over 40% of people, especially the low-income earners, living in fast-growing cities, are exposed either to flood risk areas, to areas that are exposed to landslides, to coastal zones that are sinking. And this really, I think, is how I can coin it. I must say that I think when you have good leadership, visionary leadership, that focuses on the people and puts people at the center of development, what may be seeming impossible will turn out to be possible. And I believe that if we could do what we've been able to do in Kigali, I think as our president rightly put it, if you stood in Kigali in 1994 and 95 and talked about a dream that Kigali would be where it would be today, I'm very sure many people would have considered the dreamer a crazy person. But it's been able to be achieved because of good governance, because of leadership that puts people ahead. And it's important that we look at urbanization as an opportunity and therefore guide it appropriately to ensure that actually it can be part and parcel of a whole spectrum of development process, right from reconciliation and unity to maximizing utilization of resources. And I'm saying this because I think the value add of urbanization versus any other form of, I think, development is the ability to maximize resource use. Because when you agglomerate, especially if it's very well planned, when you create vibrancy around streets, when you create good public space, what you're doing is actually bringing people together from different walks of life, especially if it's like mixed use, like you have done here in Singapore. We talk about innovation and creativity. How would it come if we didn't have the proximity of the factors of production and people at the center of that? So I think the first point is to look at what does urbanization bring on board in terms of ensuring sustainable development. The main factor I think here is the proximity of people, where if it's done amicably and if it's inclusive, then it's a point that creates dialogue, debates, innovation, creativity, and an opportunity for people to transform, to think, doing things differently. That's one. Secondly, which is also very important, the world is limited in terms of resources, one of which is land. It is inelastic. And I'm afraid to say that we are seeing an underutilization of a resource that we really need. So with good urbanization and planning, we will be able to maximize our land use. And also the infrastructure is costly. I do remember that at least, I remember in Kigali that just 1 kilometer of an asphalt road would cost us $500,000 US. How do you manage that if you don't agglomerate? So at the end of the day, you want to see the spread of the infrastructure on one hand as an opportunity for mobility, for investment, but on the other as being maximally utilized through proper planning. So these advantages of urbanization call for leadership, as I mentioned, to have good governance, to have good laws, legislation, and policies, to ensure good planning and design, because what I see is sometimes even when leaders try to plan, are they planning at scale? It's one thing to plan for an increase of maybe twice the size in the next 15, 20 years. But if you're going to be 5 times, then the scale that you're talking about here is very different. And I think we have cities that have done it very well, where we see, for instance, New York, 200 years ago, they decided that up to 30% of their land will be allocated to public land in terms of streets. And that's why it's a viable city today. So how do we plan for our cities? Are we planning short term? Are we making a long-term investment? We need to look at that. And of course, finally, it means that it has to be an enabler of investment. It has to create jobs for the people. We're seeing that many people come to cities with a dream to get good jobs, to improve their livelihoods. This is what we're calling livability. But many times when they get there, it's not a dream that comes true. How do we ensure that we educate our people and build the skills and support them to be able to benefit from the labor markets that the urbanization process brings? And of course, in the developing countries, it's important that we have a very clear linkage between urban and rural linkages, because when we talk about urbanization, it's not about capital cities. And we're not even saying that every country should be a city-state like Singapore. It has to be specific within the context of the country. But what we're saying, this should be an integrated system whereby successful rural development, of course, will need processing of the surplus from the agriculture. Those are industries, transportation, services, and finally, that is urbanization. So those interlinkages, I think, are very, very important. Well, I'm 3 years away from Kigali. I don't think I would be in a very good position to give details. But of course, maybe I'll give a bit of a context about the region and what we see generally in Africa, because I think as one of the fastest growing cities on the continent, there's a lot of hope for it. What I see as a big advantage is the coordination and the collaboration amongst the East African countries in terms of regional planning for their infrastructure and doing business and trade. So when Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, Tanzania, and Burundi consider themselves as one market and try to ease trade amongst those different countries, it means a bigger opportunity for Kigali, for Nairobi, for Kampala, Dar es Salaam, and the rest. So I believe that the leadership will build onto that to ensure that they're able to attract the market and position themselves much better. And we are seeing the same also in other regions, I think, of Africa, both Eastern Africa, Western Africa, even Southern Africa. You can say that despite the economic and financial crisis that the world has undergone in the last almost 5 years, there has been a steadfast economic growth on the continent. What needs to be focused upon is to ensure that with that steadfast growth and urbanization, that, as I said, it creates jobs, it is inclusive, it addresses issues of really ensuring that people have access to basic services, education, and infrastructure, and that they harness the benefits of this. Because much of that maybe comes from partly the extractive industry, and other services. I think what's important is for the leadership and the people to get that as an opportunity and be able to especially enhance endogenous growth. And I think it's important that we recognize that thinking big and dreaming big does not necessarily mean that we are not pro-people. Because when you enhance investment, you create jobs as long as you have supported your, especially the local community, to be able to have skills for the jobs that are available, that come up in the market. And I think that's really important, that Africa feels, yes, and is proud to think big. Like, especially I think what you have done here, Singapore dreamt big, and you've achieved your dreams. So I really think that's achievable. Now, on the issue of what the advantage of the World Cities Summit has brought on board, I must say that I think it's a huge opportunity. I did see it when I was still in Kigali, and I still see it today. I think it's good for a city and a country to dream big, to have a big vision, and then break down that vision into actionable 4-year, 2-year, 1-year plans. because it brings to the center of thinking the leaders of cities and gives them the opportunity to listen to one another. I've had the opportunity of having started off with a young leaders symposium, and the richness of knowledge, expertise that is very pragmatic, talking about how we can, leaders are using technology to enhance their governance, to enhance their service delivery, and how actually that is really contributing to the balanced social, environmental, and economic growth that I was just talking about. And sharing of knowledge amongst them really, I think, is one key thing that is very, very important. Secondly, of course, is the opportunity to partner and network, whether mayor or urban planner or an expert in the field of urban management and leadership. It's a lot easier for them to understand one another and to realize that they're not isolated. It's very easy for a demanding job, especially of leading cities, to feel overwhelmed by issues, especially where you may feel that maybe I'm the only one in such a situation. But I think coming here, and I want to commend the leaders and the organizers of the World Cities Summit, having brought together 130 mayors is a very commendable success. For us now as the UN, it's a big opportunity. And I want also to take this opportunity to call upon mayors where they are and leaders who believe in urbanization. Urbanization is such an integrated and intricate process that it calls for a high level of coordination and partnership at all levels, local, national, and global. And as I was telling them the other day, we have a generation opportunity in the sense that as the world concludes the Millennium Development Goals, we can't run away from at least appreciating the impact it has brought upon the world community, whereby the world leadership had seemingly simple but very clearly articulate goals and defining the role of everybody to garner effort, to garner the political support and commitment, and of course the financial and resource investment it calls for to be able to achieve the success, at least to a large extent that we can all appreciate. Now, that is we have the post-2015 development agenda, and there's been a lot of debate about it, and then what should follow through after 2015. Now, the issue is it's important that mayors, busy as they are at local level, must be aware of these trends and must contribute to them. Because it's really important now as we discuss, do we feel that sustainable urbanization and human settlements should be something of critical importance, that it necessitates to have a goal, a level of focus that calls for a goal? What does this mean? So I believe that the opportunity that the World Cities Summit has brought on board of bringing these leaders of cities together is also to give them the opportunity to reflect on that. And I really want to thank them because they've made a commitment that they will support that as priority, which will finally give everybody along the chain of leadership on sustainable urbanization, ensuring sustainable development, very, very key.